Okay, so when segmenting the phrase "say bite again," for the first word "say," I was looking for the S sound, which is fricative, and basically with fricatives on the spectrogram, it just comes out as like random aperiodic noise. It's just like a lot of random darkness, and so that's what I was looking for. And because it's an S, it's kind of at a higher frequency. So that's just because there's a point of constriction between the tongue and the alveolar ridge, and so that like little gap that's left for the air to push past the point of constriction is really small, so that kind of results in like a higher frequency. And on the spectrogram, you can see that there's like random darkness kind of in the upper half. So that's what I labeled as the S portion. And then for that rest of that word, I labeled that as a diphthong or a vowel. And the reason I did that was because the formants are really clear and they're dark. There's periodic noise. There's just like little pulses throughout the spectrogram. They're all even. And when a vowel is being voiced, you basically have an open oral cavity. So that's what I labeled for say. For the word bite, specifically with the B, I was looking for kind of signs that it was a stop. So with the B, it's a bilabial stop. So it's also voiced. So I was looking for that voice bar at the bottom, which is seen on the spectrogram. And I was also looking for a like little gap, or like a stop gap, and then a random burst of, I guess, air, random burst of a noise that it looks like a little like line on the spectrogram, and that happens for like a really short amount of time. With a B, there's a lot of pressure being built up behind the mouth, behind the lips, and then the lips kind of help push that noise out. So on the spectrogram, you can see that clear like little voice bar, then gap, then a little line. So that's what I labeled as the B. With the I portion of it, that's a vowel, and it's very clear on the spectrogram. You can see very clear formants, very dark, periodic noise, and again, the oral cavity is pretty much open during that production of the vowel. And then the last part is the T. So with the T, it's a voiceless stop. So I wasn't really looking for a voice bar. I was looking for just like a little line of just like random, or like not random, but just like a burst of air. So it looks like a little line. And also a little bit of aspiration after because it is a voiceless sound. With the T, it's kind of similar to the S. There's a point of constriction between the tongue and the alveolar ridge. And also I noticed that there's kind of a lot of darkness in the upper half. So I didn't know if that was a coincidence, but it kind of reminded me of the S, just because there's like a small little gap to let that air go through. So there's kind of a lot of frequency. It's kind of like at a higher frequency, if that makes sense. So with the last part, again, the first portion, you can very clearly see periodic noise just throughout the spectrogram, very clear formants, so I labeled that portion as A. Then you can see a little bit of a gap and then like a random burst of energy or sound on the spectrogram. So I labeled it as G, and basically when a G is produced, there's a point of constriction between the velum and the tongue, and that's at the back of the throat. So, you know, again, like all these other stops, there's like a lot of pressure being built up behind the point of constriction until it's finally released and that sound can be made. So on the spectrogram, I labeled that little section of just like that gap and then the little line as the G. And then there's very clear vowel. There's periodic darkness. The formants are darker. They're clear. You can see where they're going. All of the hertz, you can probably like calculate it. And then like there's just like darkness and then a couple of gaps of anti-resonance or just white. So I figured that was a nasal. It's voiced. There's like there's a low F1. And with the nasal sound, basically the velum lowers, allowing for the nasal and the oral cavity to connect. And it's the tissues and structures of the nasal and oral cavities that are able to kind of absorb the acoustics. So it's kind of like dampening. So that's why the anti-resonance happen. And so I labeled that section from the start of those anti-resonances to the end as nasal.